If you've ever wondered where to get started in saving and investing, we're going to cover that in today's video. In previous videos I've recorded, I've explained how my true introduction to personal finance came through Dave Ramsey. It's a bit ironic if you really think about it. I already had a business degree and somehow remained clueless about how to properly save and invest for my retirement. So for 3 years after my graduation, I worked professionally and saved very little for retirement because I didn't really understand the importance of compounding interest for building wealth. Now, while I'm thankful that my twin brother let me borrow a copy of Dave Ramsey's Total Money Makeover when we were 24, I wish someone would have given me the basics a little earlier. Now, in that spirit, in this video at a very high level, I'm going to cover some basic saving and investing principles for those who are just looking to get started. Now, as I walk through each point, I will closely follow the Next Dollar Roadmap, which I'll put a link to in the description below, and I'll put links to videos that are more detailed about each of the topics I discuss. Now, currently we have 185 posts on our website and over 100 topical videos on YouTube, so you can stroll as deep into the rabbit hole as you want. All right, first step is, are you really ready to save for retirement? Retirement saving is incredibly important. I'm fond of reminding people that there are loans available for a lot of things in life, but retirement is not one of them. It's up to you, with hopefully a little help from Social Security, to ensure that you have enough money saved to cover your living expenses after you stop working. But there's some other things you need to get in order first. To begin with, if you haven't already put together a budget, go do that first. I know you probably enjoy budgeting as much as the average person enjoys a good root canal, but just like those pesky trips to the dentist, budgeting is a financial necessity, at least starting out. The reason you need to do a budget is relatively simple. You can't establish a saving and investing plan if you don't know how you're really spending your money already. If you just broadly aim to save more without taking the time to figure out where that money is going to come from, you'll find yourself frustrated by very slow or no progress. So for example, the first time I did a budget, I was shocked to learn that I was spending more money eating out each month than I was on groceries from the store. So when I started eating out less, a shocking thing happened. I found I had more cash available for saving or debt reduction instead. Now, I know this isn't earth-shattering stuff, but the fact is most of us are unaware of the extent of our consumption and spending habits unless we write them down and add them up in a budget. All right, once you establish a budget, you need to have what we call an uh-oh fund or a small emergency fund. This is just around $1,000, or maybe it's up to the amount of your highest insurance deductible if you have, a house or medical insurance and there's a high deductible there. At least enough cash to cover those things. This will cover emergencies like car breakdowns, household repairs, medical or health needs, as opposed to taking on debt to pay for these expenses if they happen. Now, having adequate cash on hand to cover these costs is like a safety margin or insurance for your future cash flow. Debt places a claim on that money before you even receive it, which makes saving impossible if you're buried in debt. And once you have your budget and uh-oh fund in place, then you may be ready to get started with your retirement saving and investing. And if you have access to one, the first place to start saving and investing is anywhere you can get an employer matching contribution. Now, around 73% of American workers have access to some sort of retirement account through their employers, and of that group, around 85% also enjoy employer contributions to their plans at work. Now, if you're among those who have the option to receive some sort of employer contribution to your retirement accounts, then you should take advantage of it as soon as your uh-oh fund is in place. This is such a high financial priority because it's getting free extra money without having to exert any extra effort to get it. And if you pass it up, there's not an option to get it back. Now, naturally, the value of your employer's contribution depends on how much they're willing to give. If they'll match 100% of each dollar you save, then their contribution effectively doubles the amount of your own. If they contribute 50% of each dollar you save, then they make it 50% more effective. Now, since average market returns in the stock market are around 8.3% annually, around 7% adjusted for inflation, a single boost of 50% or 100% from your employer is like replacing years of waiting for compounding interest to increase your account size, allowing you to fast forward to larger balances right away. Maybe you can look at it as a tailwind or a turbo booster to your retirement savings, but however you view it, just be sure you place a high value on your employer match and take advantage of it. In case you're wondering how much to contribute, I recommend contributing as much to your plan at work as your employer is willing to match. So for example, my employer matches 85% of each dollar I contribute to my 401k up to 6% of my annual income. So I start by contributing 6% of my annual income to my 401k each year. Ultimately, you want to get to where you're saving at least 15 to 25% of your annual income for retirement each year, but for now, you're just maximizing the benefit of your employer's matching contributions. Once you've exhausted your employer match, tap the brakes on saving and investing until you've completed the next step, which is eliminating debt and building a real emergency fund. Taking the steps to pay off debt and fully fund an emergency fund is going to put you in a much better and stronger place financially before you save and invest more. Now first we'll talk about paying off debt. The debt I'm talking about paying off is high interest debt. And for the purposes of this video, we'll define high interest debt as debt that has an interest rate of over 6% and it's on a depreciating asset. So credit cards, debt on appliances, car debt, or even student loans in some cases could be considered high interest debt. Now the reason you want to focus on this is because the cost of carrying these debts is actually hurting your financial situation more than it's probably helping. Setting money in an IRA that earns 10% is great, but not if you owe 21% on a credit card balance. That's like trying to walk backwards up an escalator that moves downhill faster than your legs. You need to focus on getting rid of these debts so they don't hinder your progress any longer than they have to. Also, I wouldn't lump a mortgage into this debt group unless you have a loan with an adjustable rate or a ridiculously high interest rate compared to the market. In that case, you can just refinance. Paying off mortgage is actually something that's probably wise to do further down the road, especially if you're just getting into saving and investing and you're relatively young or new in your career. So the other part of step 3 was to build a fully funded emergency fund. Now, while the fund, that $1,000 or largest deductible, provides some margin for small emergencies, a fully funded emergency fund will allow you to ride out longer or more expensive financial situations like a job loss or a big expense like a new roof, an air conditioner, a car, or some natural disaster maybe happens in your area and you've just got a lot you need to fix. A fully funded emergency fund is going to allow you to cash flow that again instead of going into debt, which is backwards on the next dollar roadmap. And once again, I like to think of emergency funds as insurance policies for your financial plan, for your cash flow. It provides room for you to absorb disruptions without a catastrophic outcome. Now, I consider a fully funded emergency fund to cover 3 to 6 months of expenses. So again, you'll need that budget to figure out how much you're spending. Multiply that by 3 or 6. If you have a really secure job, 3 months will probably be enough. If you have a job where your income fluctuates or there's a lack of stability or maybe the work is seasonal, you may want something closer to 6 months. The next goal is to push your saving and investing to 15 to 25% of your income. And we already talked about taking advantage of the employer match, so you should be already contributing as much to your retirement as your employer will provide in a match. But you'll probably need to save more than this in order to sufficiently fund your retirement. Now, I recommend saving at least 15% of your income if you're starting in your 20s, 20% of your income if you're just getting started in your 30s, and 25% or more if you're starting in your 40s or older. A while back, we did a video about how much you need to save depending on how many years you have until retirement. I'm going to put a link to it above. Because I want this video to remain somewhat short, I'm not going to go through all that here. Just follow that link if you want to know more about how I arrived at that 15, 20, and 25% spectrum. But that's kind of the guideline we give. Now, earlier I shared that my employer matches 85% of my contributions to my 401k up to 6% of my income. That means my combined employer and employee contributions, those are my employer and my contributions, are equal to 11.1% of my salary. Now, since my wife and I started in our 20s, we aim to save at least 15% of our income at a minimum. Now, we also assume that she makes an equal level of contributions in her own plan at work. We need to make up the difference between that 15% and that 11.1% with additional contributions of at least 3.9% to retirement savings. Now, odds are you probably also have a similar gap after you've maxed out your employer match, and if you do, there are a few options you can consider for the next dollars that you save. There are individual retirement accounts or IRAs, your employer-sponsored plan. You can contribute beyond the employer match. If you own a business by yourself or with your spouse, you can use a solo 401k. There's also taxable brokerage accounts, which don't have really any tax advantages per se, but they're available as well. Now, if you're wondering which one of these options to pursue, again, in an effort to keep this video kind of brief, I'm not going to get into that detail. I have another video that we've already done, which I'll put a link again above, and we'll also put a link in the description below. I would typically recommend that you use an IRA next because it gives you the greatest amount of flexibility to choose the account custodian you're most comfortable with, and it provides a range of investment options that will allow you to target your investment objectives with accuracy. That's diversification, asset allocation, asset classes, the expense ratios, all those sorts of things. Now, since annual contributions to IRAs are limited to $7,000 in 2024, they go up to $8,000 if you're 50 or older. If you still need to save more to meet your goal, I would move back to the employer-sponsored plan you have at work. However, if you're eligible for an HSA or solo 401k, those are possibly even better options. Ultimately, the best strategy for your circumstances will be personalized to you, and I can't address that in the video. So I recommend do your research, watch our other videos, and hopefully that'll lead you to a direction. Next, you want to keep taking advantage of these tax-advantaged options until you run out of money to save or you run out of room to save in these accounts, as they all have limitations. After that, move on to taxable brokerage accounts, which have no contribution limits. Next, I want to talk a little bit about Roth and traditional accounts. As you look into enrolling into many of the plans I've described previously, you'll probably be asked at some point if you prefer to make a contribution on a Roth or traditional/tax deferred basis. Now first, you should know that the words Roth account are a reference to the tax treatment of your contributions, not the actual account type. So IRAs, 401ks, 457s, 403bs, thrift savings plans, they're all different types of accounts. And each one of these account types allows Roth or traditional contributions. Now Roth contributions to these accounts are made on an after-tax basis, meaning you don't receive a tax deduction for the contribution, but the benefit of this arrangement is that you get tax-free earnings withdrawals for the rest of your life. On the other hand, traditional or tax-deferred contributions are made on a tax-deductible basis, meaning that the contributions, you get a tax deduction for making contributions, but later on, the withdrawals that you make in retirement are going to be fully taxable. So in summary, Roth contributions allow you to pay taxes on the front end, forever removing that liability from your future. Tax-deferred contributions provide you with a tax deduction today, but you'll pay taxes on those withdrawals in retirement. Now, the superiority of making contributions on a Roth or tax-deferred basis will come down to your tax rate when you make the contribution versus the tax rate when you make the withdrawals. If you're in a lower bracket today than you expect to be when you make withdrawals, then you should probably contribute to the Roth so you can pay the tax now at a low rate and withdraw it later to avoid the higher tax rate then. If your tax situation is the opposite, then you should probably use tax-deferred contributions to take advantage of lower taxes later on. Once again, we have another video that goes into more detail about this decision. I'll put a link to it above and in the description below. After you've reached that 15 to 25% saving and investing rate, just repeat the process year after year. Let compounding interest do its work, and you should have an adequate retirement savings. Now, there's certainly more to personal finance than I've covered here, but this brief explanation should be enough to get you started. If you just do these things year in and year out for most of your working life, you'll find yourself with quite a bit of wealth as you get older. I've been at it for 17 years myself, and I can confirm with confidence this plan has worked well for my wife and I. For more about the accounts I've discussed in this video, please check out the playlists that are below. We got some links to other videos that are relevant to this topic. We have lots of information there and also on our website at martinmoney.com. If you have any suggestions about content you'd like me to write about or make videos about, please let me know in the comments below, and YouTube will send me a notification when you do that. As always, I'm grateful for your time and your interest in my videos. God bless and take care.